So look, we're getting into today. We've covered the Middle East, the modern Middle East, and the other day uh, we were talking about what happens in Russia. That's the first country that we're tackling here after the war's over. Okay, and we said Russia, the old Russian Empire, was going to reorganize itself. It'd been the victim of a revolution. A group called the Bolsheviks helped to overthrow the Tsar, and they're like, hey, we're reforming Russia and adding a little land to it, and we're calling ourselves now the Soviet Union. Okay? The sickle and the hammer you see on the flag there on the red background. And the Bolsheviks, think of the Bolsheviks as like a political party, only violent. All right? And they're willing to use violence to get what it is that they want. The sickle and the hammer, the symbol of the Bolsheviks, and we'll explain why that is here in a minute. But the Bolsheviks help overthrow the Tsar, and they're like, hey, peace out, y'all. We need something different. The Tsar had done some things in Russia, had neglected the peasants, and people were tired of getting treated poorly, okay? And their ideas about the world and how our country should be run or how their country should be run were going to change. This shows you where the Soviet Union is on the map. You can see it takes up a huge portion of land, all right? They have a massive amount of natural resources. However, a good chunk of that northern territory is uninhabitable because it's so freezing cold. All right, so there is a lot of it. It's like an Arctic wasteland. But the parts over there by Europe are the ones that are more inhabited than in other places. All right, so that's the Soviet Union. But here's the thing: we got to know more about this revolution and the background behind it. The Bolsheviks were inspired to try out a new economic and governmental system. We said, look, the other day we defined capitalism, where in a capitalist society, people are free to own businesses. They operate the businesses as they see fit. They create the prices. They pay their workers what they want. They decide how to produce things. What we call the means of production, like farms, factories, those are in the hands of private entities. All right? But not everybody believes in capitalism is the best way because, look, in a capitalist society, what's the number one goal of a business? To make money, to profit. Okay? And people said, look, that's all well and good and everything, but all business owners, if all they care about is profit, how do they end up treating their workers? Usually not all that great, okay? And a lot of people do hard work so that somebody who's not doing a lot of hard work gets money, all right? And the Bolsheviks believed in changing this system. They're like, the capitalist system's not working for us anymore. So they believed in moving towards what they called socialism and communism, all right? And they based socialism and communism off the ideas of this guy, Karl Marx. Okay? Karl Marx, he's a German philosopher, and he also has a fantastic beard, I'm not going to lie. All right? And Karl Marx had quite a bit of time on his hands, and he did some studying and some thinking, and here's some conclusions that he came up with about capitalism and what was going to happen in capitalist societies. Okay? First of all, Karl Marx said there's two groups of people really in a capitalist society. One, the bourgeoisie. That's how you say that word, the bourgeoisie. All right, can you say it, Smith? Bourgeoisie. There you go. Now, you know, the bourgeoisie, they're the business-owning class. They accumulate all the wealth in society. All right? Those are what we would call the one percenters. All right? You ever get something really nice or fancy and somebody goes, that's so bougie? Well, take a guess where that comes from. The bourgeoisie. That's the business owning class. They control the wealth. If you're super wealthy, you can afford all that stuff. Like your AirPods, so bougie. All right? Marx said the other class was the proletariat, the working class. These are the people that worked their butts off so the bourgeoisie could benefit from that. Okay? And here's what Marx said is going to happen between these two groups. He said what's going to happen is these proletariat, they're going to work their butt off, all right? And do they get much of the wealth? No. He said, look, the bourgeoisie is going to hoard most of that wealth for themselves, and eventually what's going to happen to the proletariat? Will they be happy about that? No. And he said, eventually the proletariat will get so angry, they will rise up and revolt against the bourgeoisie. He said, there's going to be class warfare, okay? All right? He said, you're basically going to have the really poor people against the rich people. All right? Now, the The proletariat, they don't have a lot of money, but what do they have? A lot of numbers. And he said, look, when class warfare happens, who's going to win that battle? The proletariat will. And he said, when class warfare happens, the proletariat is going to overthrow the bourgeoisie. All right? Now, he said, look, that's all well and good and everything, but he said, after that, you have to change. You have to get away from that capitalist system. That capitalist system's not working for us anymore. Okay? And he says, once the proletariat rises up and overthrows them, you got to move over here to socialism. All right? And in socialism, and you might want to jot this down, socialism, right? Who controls the means of production, the factories and the farms? Government. The government does. Okay? You have government controlled means of production. Right? And they're like, hey, we'll put business in the hands of government. Because the government is probably more likely, like once we overthrow the bourgeoisie and we now have the proletariat in charge, they're more likely to look out for workers because they know what it's like. All right? So we got socialism here. What we're going to do in socialism, they're going to control the means of production. We're going to treat workers more fairly, and we're going to control the production of everything. All right? In socialism, people are like, that sounds really good. Okay? But look, Karl Marx said, socialism is all well and good and everything, but he goes, this is just a stopping point. He said, it's not the ultimate goal. Okay? He said the ultimate goal is to go from socialism to communism. He's like, this is the ultimate goal. Okay? And he says you can't get there overnight. Right? You don't just change like something like this overnight. You have to do it slowly over time. All right? And in a communist system, this was going to be completely different. He said the goal here in communism is to create a classless society. We want to create a classless society. And in a classless society, he said, you know what? Every piece of work is going to be valued. Right? Doesn't matter if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a street sweeper, a garbage man, a waiter or waitress. The goal is to value all work equally. Oh, that sounds nice. Wouldn't it be nice if your work was valued as much as anybody? And by the way, do we put here in America, in a capitalist society, do we put different values on different jobs? Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. Does anyone ever say, and I would say this in a way, does anybody ever say, like, I want my kid to grow up to be a fast food worker? No, they don't. All right? And that doesn't, like, I'm not demeaning that. You can actually make, you can move up in a fast food company. There's nothing wrong with that. But what do we prioritize in this society? Doctors and lawyers. Why? They make a lot of money. Okay? And Karl Marx said, we don't want to do that. We want to put value on all work. Right? And he said, I want to create this classless society where everybody's treated the same regardless of your occupation. Okay? And he said, look, this is what he called communism. He said, when we get to this point where we have this classless society, he said it's going to be a worker's paradise. And he said, look, in this worker's paradise, what you're going to do is we're going to match people up to jobs that they have the ability to do. Whatever you're really good at, we're going to have you do that job, and people are going to be happy doing it. Okay? People are going to be super happy doing their job. Right? Because ultimately, if, for example, let's say, like, Smith, what are you good at? History. So we're going to make you a historian. That's your job. You're going to be a historian. What are you shaking your head at? Doesn't matter what you want to be. You're going to do what you're good at because you'll eventually be happy doing that job. You'll learn to love it because it's what you're good at. All right. What are you good at, Jackson? What's your best skill, your best subject?
Math.
Math. We're going to turn you into an engineer. Doesn't matter if you want to be an engineer. You're going to be so happy doing it that you're going to want to do it, and eventually you will appreciate it. Okay? And he said, look, ultimately, when you get to this state of communism, everybody will be working so happily that they'll just only take the resources that they need. So, like, for example, let's say that you're an engineer, and when you come home from when you leave your job every day, let's say you go to the grocery store, and it's the grocery store that Lester's in charge of running because he knows about food, nutrition, and logistics. And so when you go to Lester's grocery store, you only take the food that you need for you and your family. And let's say you have a wife and 2 kids, all right? You're only going to take food for 4 people, all right? And you'll be so happy at your job and in life that you won't want to take more than that. And I'll teach kids not because I get paid to do it, but because I'm just enjoy doing it. And, you know, if I go to the grocery store or over here to Riley's store where she works in clothing as a tailor at a seamstress, we're going to, I'll just only ask for the clothes that I want in terms of my needs, all right? Sorry, I didn't mean want, but your needs. And that's the idea behind communism. You would only take the resources you need and you'd work to the best of your ability. Now let's pretend there's Losh over there, okay? And Katie's, she's not all that bright. But we still want to find her meaningful work to do. So we're going to make Katie, we're going to make her a street sweeper. Her job is to go out and sweep off the sidewalks and the streets. It's important work that has to get done. And that's what she's good at. And Katie's happy every day. And just like the engineer, she goes to the grocery store or to the tailor and she gets whatever clothes she needs. Is that something that's feasible? No, it's probably not. Because what do we know about human beings? They're greedy, okay? Getting us to that state of communism is not easy to do, right? Because, for example, like, hey, Owens, where's a store you like to shop? American Eagle. So if I told you, for instance, that you could go to American Eagle and you could take only the clothes that you needed, how would that work out? How many clothes do you need? Would you perhaps be tempted to take more than you need? Probably so. You go to the grocery store, okay? Well, how much food do you really need? Would you take that extra bag of potato chips? It's not that I need them, it's you what? You want them, all right? Nobody needs potato chips, but everybody wants them, okay? And look, that idea of communism, it sounds, and this is always the way that people describe socialism or even communism, that it sounds really good on paper, okay? It would be nice if everybody just went and did a job and was happy doing their job, and that we didn't look at people differently for being in different social classes, or we didn't put a different emphasis on jobs. But that's not the way that the world works, because human beings are naturally greedy, okay? Question, Smith.
So the Bolsheviks, were they like a lower class, like?
The Bolsheviks were part of that, what we would call what Marx would call the proletariat. These were your working people who got tired of working really hard while they felt like the business owners were reaping all the benefits.
So they wanted communism, so they make everything equal instead of being level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they said, look, we can't go from straight capitalism to straight communism. We got to go to socialism first. All right? Look, Marx even believed that at some point what would happen is you wouldn't even need a government anymore. You wouldn't need police, because people would be so happy doing their jobs and just living life, you wouldn't need them. People would just go and do stuff. And like, you guys are looking at me like I'm crazy. Look, I didn't come up with the idea. Now, this classless society, this perfect world that Marx envisioned, he also said, look, these ideas, he goes, my ideas about socialism and communism, once one country does it, it's going to spread to the rest of the world. He said this will take on a worldwide revolution. The ideas about communism are going to spread from one country to the next. Okay? Once one country does it, then it's going to spread everywhere. You wouldn't even have to worry about it, because once you do it here in Russia and the Soviet Union, then workers in Europe will hear about it, and what will they do in their own country? Same thing. Their proletariat will rise up, and they'll create this socialist government that'll be in there temporarily until we can get to a communist government. And then all of a sudden in America, it would do that too. By the way, Americans were super nervous when Karl Marx's ideas about communism got popular in the Soviet Union. Why would America be super nervous about that? They're terrified that this is going to happen. What do you know about the history of America in the late 1800s, early 1900s?
They just got established.
Not that.
It was full of rich people.
It had rich people, the elite. Were they sharing their wealth with the workers?
No.
Remember, what's that time period that we talked about? The Gilded Age, where you had the wealthier class that was reaping a lot of benefits, but the working class, remember the factory conditions and everything else were terrible, okay? And so Americans were legit concerned about socialism and communism coming to the United States. Now, luckily for us, that after World War I, like the 1920s, America had made some changes to try to help workers establish more rights. And so they weren't as inclined to go along with communism. But in the 20s and then later on in the 50s, you're going to see there's definitely a movement, a communist movement in the United States. And even today, there's still people who are, they like the idea of socialism or communism. Okay? Now, one other thing about Marx's ideas here, too. Violence is used as a means of control. All right? When the proletariat rises up against the bourgeoisie, what happens if we're all the workers? And what happens if Riley over here says, I don't think what we're doing is the right thing. I think that the business owners should get to keep their money. What if she doesn't go along with what we want to do? We have to crack a few heads sometimes. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And if she doesn't want to help us get to the workers' paradise, where we all have this classless society, then you know what? She's a problem that's in the way. And you're going to see that happens in the Soviet Union. All right? Now, look at this right here, this little cartoon. Okay? This shows you, this is obviously in Russian, but you don't need to be able to read Russian to understand. You see the guy that is on top, and once again, level matters. All right? Is anybody above that guy with the broom? And what's he sweeping away? Government's one of them. The old government. There's a rich guy, the fat cat at the bottom with the suit. Notice he's grossly overweight. Who else is he sweeping away? Who's the guy on the bottom left? What is it? Nope, not a bad guess. A religious figure. That is an Russian Orthodox priest. Right? Why, by the way, the communists in the Soviet Union and communists in general are typically very not happy with religion. They thought, and Karl Marx described religion, he called it the opiate of the masses. And he said, look, he said, rich people, the bourgeoisie, they use Christianity to keep you down because they're like, oh, Jesus says that being poor is good. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Okay? And Jesus says you don't need riches to have a good life. And Karl Marx was saying that, hey, that right there is just to keep you down. Okay? That if you realize the truth that those really rich people are just keeping the money for themselves, you might get angry. So they try to tell you stuff about Jesus so that you'll just accept it and you won't question it, the fact that you're poor. All right? And you see the czar up there and monarchy and royalty in general, they're sweeping them away. Now, what's really important too, what do you see that he's standing on, that man is standing on, that's sweeping away stuff? The world. Remember, Marx believed, and the Russians bought into this too, that communism would spread worldwide. He said there'd be a worldwide revolution. Once other workers see us sweeping away all this bourgeoisie stuff, they'll do the same. Ooh. All right. Now, the leader of the Bolshevik movement in Russia, in the Soviet Union, this guy on the left, Vladimir Lenin. Okay? Ooh. Look at him. He's a very serious man. Very serious man. Okay? Vladimir Lenin, let me give you a little information about him that is important. He is the leader of the Bolsheviks. All right? And he's obviously a believer in communism. And when he started the revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, he promised the people three things: peace, land, and bread. That's pretty simple. All one-syllable words. Peace, land, and bread. It's better than the hippies. Peace, dope, and love. Right? Peace, land, and bread. And you're going to find out Lenin, even though he's not exactly what you call the nicest guy in the world, he does deliver on his promises. Because peace, first of all, what did Russia do in World War I? What is it? They withdrew from the war. All right? Lenin said, hey, we got to get out of this war. Because he said, look, he goes, those capitalists, the Tsar, started the war, and who do you think had to do all the fighting in Russia? The working class. He said, it's the proletariat. He goes, they're sending you out there for a war that the Tsar helped start. Oh, man. Lenin and his communist, his Bolshevik followers said, why don't you take those guns out of the trenches and point them at the Tsar and his people, the capitalist dogs. Oof. All right? Now, Lenin says peace, land, and bread. So he gets them out of World War I, but he says now that I've got us out of the war, I've got to provide land to people and bread. And so here's what Lenin does. To provide land to people, he gives the poor peasants who were farming the land of wealthy owners, he gives the peasants small pieces of land. They redistribute the land to the peasants. Question?
Can they do that, legally though?
Yeah, when you're in charge of the new government, when you basically kick the Tsar out and you're part of the working class, he said, yeah, because if you're a poor farmer and you've had to work on Katie's farm your whole life and you never had any land of your own and she paid you crap, are you okay with Vladimir Lenin taking all the land and giving you a piece? Absolutely. He takes the land from the wealthy, the bourgeoisie, and gives it to people of the proletariat. All right? It says, now this is your land. That's awful nice. All right, by the way, if you're a member of the bourgeoisie, do you really want to be in Russia at this time? Gosh, no. It's an ugly place for you to be. Now, here's what Lenin does. He said, look, I've given peace to people, I've given land to people, and he said, now I've got to provide bread. And he wasn't just talking literal bread, he's talking about food in general, because the poor people of Russia were having a tough time affording them. So he says to deal with that one, he started something called the New Economic Policy. Right? He started something called the New Economic Policy. And here's how it worked. All right? He said, hey, the government is going to take half of whatever you grow in terms of the crops. And I always look at this image up here, and this will help you remember it. Okay? So say you grow 10 tons of food this year. All right? The government's going to take half of it, but whatever you had left over, you can sell on the open market. Meaning you could sell it to neighbors, you could sell it to other Russians, you could sell it internationally. It's yours to do with what you want. Now, do you think peasants are happy about that? Absolutely. You've gotten peace, you've got land, and here's the thing. Here's how this is going to work, okay? He said, look, a lot of people were critical of Lenin. They're like, that doesn't sound like socialism. He goes, no. This is important because what does it incentivize farmers to do? Grow more crops. Because he said, if you know you're going to get to keep half of whatever you produce, you want to produce more. All right? Because half of 10 tons is more than half of 5 tons. All right? So the government said, here's what we're going to take. So whatever you grow, we're going to take half of it, and then the rest you sell it for whatever price you want to, whatever you can get. Okay? Now, that new economic policy is going to be beneficial because, take a guess, first of all, what do you think the main crop in Russia is that you use to make bread? Wheat. Okay? And wheat is one of the main crops that is still grown there, and you need it to be able to make bread and to feed people. And bread's something that's pretty simple. It's like a staple of people's diet. All right? And so ultimately it would incentivize these farmers to grow more. Yes?
Sorry, I think I missed it. Can you say what peace is again?
Yes, when he got the Russians out of World War I. Okay? So he's delivered peace. Now he gave the peasants land. And he says, you know what? The peasants are going to grow food. And he said the food that we take out of like the rural areas from the farmers, we're going to take that to the cities and use to feed them. So he says, now I'm delivering on peace, land, and bread. Oh, wow. Right? And Lenin says, look, this is a slow march to communism, okay? He says, you can't just change everything overnight. Right? man, delivering on his promises. Now, don't go around thinking that Vladimir Lenin was all cool and everything, because at the same time, he had no problem killing people who resisted. Right? Now, the peasants, they do so well on this system that some of the peasants who were nobodies before the revolution, they actually build a decent lifestyle for themselves. And some of these wealthier farmers, they refer to them, the terms up there on the board above where Losh's head is, and it's on your outline too. They're called kulaks. And it comes from a Russian word meaning like tight-fisted, meaning those people, they save their money really, really well, and they essentially were able to have a better standard of living. So a lot of these Russian farmers are glad that Lenin is fulfilling his promises. They're like, hey, he got us out of that stupid war. He gave us land, and now we're farming, and yeah, they take half of it, but at the same time, it's kind of nice because we can sell whatever we have left for whatever price we want, right? And Lenin's got a good thing going here, or at least he's moving in the right direction. Okay, it's kind of like if you got, somebody stabbed you in the chest with a blade, and you're like, I've stopped the bleeding at least. Okay, maybe I still need to improve, but at least I've stopped the bleeding. Now, sad thing happens for Lenin, though. Poor old Lenin is going to die. 1924, he bites the dust, right? And it wasn't anything sinister, okay? Lenin dies from like a brain aneurysm. Now, fun fact of the day, and you're going to love this. I got to show you this too. Vladimir Lenin, he is so revered as the person who starts the communist movement. They took his body and they took him to the taxidermist. They embalmed his body and preserved it. It lies in state perpetually. So, like, literally, you can go and see Lenin's body today. He has a mausoleum. What do you think? Y'all want to go see field trip? Go see Lenin? What? Why not? How about this? Whenever, like now, that by the way, every few years, because these chemicals, like, they don't work for forever, they got to touch him up a little bit. They got to put some more chemicals in him and put a little makeup on him to make sure that he looks okay. I don't know that he necessarily wanted it, but they revered him so much that they did it anyway. What's wrong? You don't like that idea? How about, that's what I want them to do to me. They could turn me into a statue, and they could put me out in the courtyard out there. What do you think?
Probably just build a statue.
I don't know. How about this? Bill put me out there, and then put bronze over me. Now, here's the thing. When Lenin dies, okay, when Vladimir Lenin dies, his right-hand man here, on the right side of him, Joseph Stalin, takes over. What's wrong, Chloe?
It's starting to get a little better now.
Now, when Stalin takes over, okay, there's some real problems, right? Stalin's a really brutal guy, and before it's all said and done, Stalin is going to become the greatest mass murderer in history. Right? He makes Hitler look like a really nice guy. Ooh. Now, Stalin, by the way, his real last name is this long Russian name that I cannot pronounce, and he changed his name to Stalin because it's the Russian word for steel. Like, you want to sound tougher. Like, you're not Chloe Smith anymore, you're Chloe Iron. What do you think? Literal? You're not literal anymore. You're steel. What do you think? Work? I don't know. Or, you know what? I don't know. Hightower's a pretty good name. Like Hightower. But, you know what? How about Stone Crusher? That's what we'll call you. No, you don't like that one? Okay, I was just asking. Now, Stalin is an interesting character. He was originally in college as a young man. He was in college at a seminary to become a priest. And he abandoned it and started hanging around with Lenin and the Bolsheviks, and eventually he kind of renounces religion altogether, and he's going to be somebody who, he rules in a very different fashion, okay? The first thing Stalin does when he gets in power, all right, is that he decides the farmers have it too good, okay? Because he goes, hey, that new economic policy, he goes, look, this right here, He's like, that looks too much like capitalism. You're letting farmers sell a lot of their crops on the open market. Who do you think it'd be better in the hands of, according to Stalin? The government. And here's what he does. He's like, I'm canceling the new economic policy, all right? And Stalin here is going to implement, he says, the farmers, you have it way too good, okay? And so he goes, you know what we're going to do? This is my plan, all right? It's going to be more socialist. For example, if you grow 10 tons, we're going to take basically everything and leave you just enough for you to eat. And you'll be glad for it, all right? By the way, how do you think the farmers take this? They are furious. They're like, we have actually prospered for once, and now you're ruining it. Oh, man. Now, what do you think this does to their incentive to grow? Are you going to work harder to grow more crops? Why not? Because you know the government's just going to take it all right? Now, here's what's really crazy. When Stalin does this, because he makes the farmers so angry, he accidentally triggers a what in his own country? A famine. There's a massive famine in the Soviet Union because the farmers, some of them were so angry at Stalin that they refused to farm. Right? Those kulaks who had done really well, they were the most angry at Stalin, and Stalin was furious back at them. And if you refused to farm anymore, he disappeared you. Okay? The famine is so bad, and like the people disappearing because they refuse to cooperate. You know how we do a census every 10 years in the United States to count the people? The numbers in the Soviet Union, the population had gone down so dramatically, the government had to fake the population numbers, the census numbers, because people were dying at such exorbitant rates. Wow, that's awkward, right? So look, the farmers, he ruins that. And also, Stalin said, you know what? We can't have like this part capitalism, part socialism, all right? He's going to change other stuff too. We'll get to that later.